Hello, good people, and welcome to another episode of The Privacy Sphere. I'm your girl, Shanice Naisenya. Today, we're going to dive into some statistics that we got from analyzing ODPC determinations in 2025 and what those statistics mean for organizations and professionals dealing with personal data in Kenya. If you're an organization in the health sector, finance, fintech, education, and any other data-intensive space or data-intensive sector, this conversation is for you. And if you're a professional who wants to know where is the regulator leaning, what are the risks that we're going to look forward to in 2026, stay tuned. And always like, share, and subscribe. Let's get into it. Now, before we get into the statistics themselves, it's important to know where is this data coming from. For the past 2 consecutive years, the DPGSK, you remember that the society I brought last episode. If you didn't check it out, just pause there, go watch that, and then come back. But yeah, those guys, they usually conduct analysis of ODPC determinations to try and see how is the law being applied in practice. So this year, I had the honor of coordinating the group of professionals, actually both years, that was handling that report. And in my opinion, one of the main differences that was just popping out was the sheer number of complaints that ODPC is getting in a year. In 2024, we had about 48, and in 2025, almost double, 96. So this clearly shows the regulatory posture is improving, and organizations need to be worried. But we're going to see who are the culprits, what are the issues that have come up this year, 2025, and we can see how best are we going to protect ourselves in 2026. So let's begin with who are the culprits? Who are these people that keep appearing in these complaints and determinations? 4 sectors were heavily affected. I'm sure we can guess the first one. Maybe let's just try. Yeah, you're right. The money, where the money is. So the finance and credit institutions, everything to do with banking, microfinance, SACCOs, that was heavily seen in the complaints in 2025. Another sector is the digital media and marketing, especially in advertising, promotions, public relations. In fact, in the entertainment sector is where we saw one of the biggest, actually the largest determinations given in 2025, amounting up to 1.5 M. Can you imagine? And do you want to know what they did? Do you want to know? These guys, they held an event. And then when they went to the event, they used people's pictures for marketing and other commercial purposes. When the complainants took them to the ODPC, they said, but there were notices everywhere in Kiswahili and English even. And the fact that you came to the event and you posed for pictures is enough for us to use your pictures for marketing. You can guess how this went if we're talking about it now, Yeah. The ODPC was like, that is not enough. Remember when we talked about express consent and what it needs for it to be valid? Again, if you didn't watch that episode, pause, go, and then come back. But essentially, that was one of the sectors that was prevalent. Another sector, education institutions. This one was heavily littered with issues of parental consent. And finally, manufacturing. Can you imagine? I never saw that one coming, but it was there. So what do these sectors have in common? What do we see are the similarities tying them together? So first of all, they are highly data intensive. They deal with a lot of personal data. And if they're appearing, that means they're not doing the right job in safeguarding the data that they have. Another similarity is their customer facing. So anytime where you deal with a lot of customers, a lot of data subjects, as we call them, that is going to be a high risk area. And another similarity is they're heavily reliant on third parties, be it your agents, if you have call centers, those are agents, your processors. These areas, whenever an organization does not have control over what is happening with their data on the ground, it's a high risk area. So clearly we can see the risk increases where the data flows are complex and when the organization doesn't have full control over what is being done with this data on the ground. So, seeing that one reason, we now ask ourselves, what are the other issues that got organizations in trouble in 2025? From the report, it was clear majority of the complaints were centered around four main issues. And what the first issue was unlawful processing of personal data. Remember, we had 96 determinations, or rather 96 complaints in 2025. And out of the 96, 21 had something to do with unlawful processing of personal data. I remember one case that stood out to me. It was quite funny because it involved a loan takeover promotion where the company was promoting its services for taking over loans. And when they were asked where they got the customer's personal data, can you guess where they said? Market intelligence. Yani market intelligence came and whispered the customer's data. Yeah. And then they sent messages. Yeah. People are just interesting in Kenya. But oh well. Another issue was consent. Again, out of the 96, 53 complaints were around consent. So clearly, this is an issue for any organization and any professional out there. This is something you have to look at. This was where we saw that determination I was talking about for 1.5M. And it was another example of the ODPC diversifying its redress mechanisms, because this was the first case where we saw compensations were given directly to the data subjects. And in this case, they were awarded 500,000 Kenya shillings. Kenyans, are you hearing me? Guys, are you listening? 500K for someone who uses your picture without your consent. Whatever you do with that information is up to you. So this was a contributor of one of the main differences that we saw between 2024 and 2025. Because in 2024, we saw there was a lot of flexibility in how you interpret consent. But in 2025, it was clear. If you say you relied on implied consent at they're our customers, so we thought they would want to know what is going on with our other products. Nah. If you relied on blanket or bundled consent, again, we keep saying, when it comes to getting consent from your customers, stop putting it in all those pages of documents and then you assume because they've consented to the rest, they've also consented to their use of pictures or promotional messages. It doesn't stand. If you want to get consent, put it separately from the other terms and conditions. And assumed consent through silence, or they didn't refuse when we sent the messages, they didn't decline or they didn't opt out of those promotions, they were quiet, so we just assumed they consented. That didn't stand in 2025, and clearly it's not going to stand moving forward. So let's just change our ways, let's just listen, let's not be stubborn. On parental consent, this was out of the 53 consent cases, 4 had to deal with minors. And all of them were around giving consent when it came to using children's images. Another case that stood out to me here, I felt it was a bit absurd. But hear me out and then tell me what you think. This deputy principal, a whole deputy principal, recorded a child doing a punishment and posted it on social media. Of course, it went viral. This is interesting because it touches on 2 principles of privacy. The first of all, we are not disputing that punishment, okay? The punishment itself is not in dispute. The way it was handled was what is being disputed. Because first, the minor was not informed that that video was going to be taken or it was going to be posted. So that in itself is a violation of transparency principle. They didn't know, right? The second principle is the necessity. Was it really necessary for this deputy principal to record and post this child? They could have handled it in another way. It wasn't necessary, nor was it proportionate to the purpose. Now you see how the principles come in play into our day-to-day, right? The other issue is with compliance to data subject rights. This was actually one of the largest issues that we spotted, because out of the 96 determinations, 61 had to do with data subject rights. From access to correction to erasure to objection and to be informed. In fact, the right to be informed was one with a lot of complaints, 27. And the problem is not one of the things I saw, the problem is not that companies don't have mechanisms to exercise or for customers to complain. The issue is you complain, but you never get a response back. They don't do anything. So organizations, you need to confirm, are your mechanisms actually functioning, or are they just there so that you can say, oh, on paper we've complied, but operationally you've not? Because clearly we can see from 2024 to 2025, ODPC is shifting from paper compliance to now operationally. Can you prove that you've complied? Okay, you have the policies, you have the structures, but are they working? These are some of the things that were highlighted by most of the determinations when it came to exercising data subject rights. So seeing the sectors that were being fined and the offenses they were being fined for, let's look at the state of the fines. How are they looking? Because organizations can always argue, we'll put a budget for fines. See, we've seen it's like 200K, 100K, and then we pay and the story is over. By the way, just so you know, there's something in the works for it to no longer be like a blanket amount. It's going to be a percentage of your turnover or your profits. So think again. But looking at the fines, out of the 96 cases, 82 were given fines and compensation awards. Fines are those that are issued now to the company who has violated the privacy rights, and compensation awards are given to the actual individuals whose rights have been violated, as seen in that entertainment case that we've cited. Out of the 82 fines and compensations that were given, the finance sector had 40% of the fines. Our finance sector really needs help. But I feel like they're the most compliant because there's a spillover from having CBK as a regulator, and then now you have ODPC. So there's a bigger push in that sector and more eyes there. But I feel like we need to diversify the pressure, It needs to be pushed to the other sectors. But that's neither here nor there. That's my opinion. Don't go quote me. The highest fine was given in the entertainment and marketing sector, the 1.5 million Kenya shillings. Tourism and hospitality made an appearance here with the third highest fine, 750,000 Kenya shillings. And the education and the telco sector tied fourth highest with 700,000 Kenya shillings. Out of the determinations, 35 got enforcement notices. Enforcement notice is when the ODPC tells you need to correct a certain area. They give you rules. They tell you do this, this, and this to rectify a breach or to make your company more compliant. If you don't do that, now it escalates to a fine or other more stringent measures. The enforcement notices were seen in the finance sector, the energy sector, health sector, telecommunication sectors. 8 complaints were dismissed due to lack of evidence. One was referred to prosecution. This was interesting because this was the first time we were seeing this happen. One was referred to prosecution due to the seriousness of the breach. So now, if you are not compliant, not only might you get fined, not only might you be given a compensation, might there be a compensation award given, you can now also be referred for prosecution. And now when you get there, when you start putting civil damages or emotional damage, it's going to be a lot. You don't want the heat. Just be on the safer side, yeah? So for organizations, this is a key lesson because we can see that non-compliance doesn't just affect your regulatory posture. It now affects your financial planning, your risk assessments, and your reputation. Because now, seriously, that first of all, that company with events, how are you going to convince people to come back to your events? And the way Kenyans like cancelling people. So reputational damage is a thing that you have to consider now moving forward. Now, moving away from organizations and speaking from a perspective of professionals. If you are an internal DPO and you're seeing how the trends are going, if you're an internal professional working in these organizations and you're trying to gauge where you need to protect yourself, I think you're able to sense now. And we also have another set of statistics apart from the survey that is done, the report that is done on ODPC determinations. The DPGSK also carries out a survey of data governance professionals to understand what are these challenges we're facing in the workplace. And these are quite interesting. and they kind of speak to each other together with the determinations that we see coming from the ODPC. So from that survey, 22.2 of you guys said that you're struggling to carry out DPIAs. DPIAs are assessments that look at how processing activities in your organization affect your customers or whoever it is you're processing their data, right? Thinking back, there was one time when we had a town hall with the ODPC and we were discussing how to conduct DPIAs. And from their perspective, most organizations actually think DPIAs are done by the DPO, but that is not the case. From that conversation, we were able to learn a DPIA is a collaborative effort because remember, you as the DPO, you don't know everything about this processing that is occurring, right? There are techies in there who need to tell you how is the data flow going to be? What are the safeguards that they've put in place? And this is information that the ODPC usually asks for in their template. By the way, they have a template. Don't bother creating your own. Just extract it as is. Use it that way. Minimize the headache for yourself, okay? And it is a collaborative effort. Make sure that the process owner is part of the conversation, is helping you fill these gaps. It is not for you to do. Yours is to guide as the DPO with how the Act and the regulations have said and the guidance notes, and guide internally the organization to conduct that DPA. I hope that helps someone who was there who said that in that survey. Another issue was ensuring consent and responding to breaches. They highlighted this as a problem. So ask yourself internally as a DPO, how do you handle breach notification? Especially when you're looking at differentiating the breach that doesn't need to be reported and the reportable breach. Do you log them either way, all of them? What are your internal processes for escalation from departments? If you're in an organization that has branches, how do you escalate breach incidences to the DPO? Those are things you need to think about. And finally, there was an issue with data retention, where 16.6 professionals said that they have a problem when it comes to creating clear data retention protocols. Because remember, the more data you hold, the more the risk you're dealing with. Because that is again, data is the new gold. Now you're holding a whole vault and you're not even sure how long you're supposed to hold it for. You're not even sure if you've anonymized it. If anyone hacks you, they get just the raw data. Yay. I think we need to have more conversations on this, right? If you tell me in the comment section, we will. But yeah, those are the statistics that we have seen from the surveys that have been conducted in 2025. So let's just briefly look at the overview. What are the biggest differences that we've seen in 2024 and 2025? We have clearly moved from desktop compliance, from paper compliance, from policy registration. We've moved from that. We are now into operational compliance. How are your structures vis-a-vis the law? That is what you need to look at, one. We have also tightened our consent standards, where we are no longer listening to implied consent, blanket consent, assumed consent. None of that is going to stand anymore. Your consent mechanisms have to be type-proof. If you're collecting through forms, you need to make sure that you've expressly stated what it's for, how long you're going to keep it for, when is it going to be deleted, and how they're going to access their rights based on that particular processing. We've also seen that we have higher and more meaningful financial consequences. We have higher fines. We are now seeing compensation to the data subjects themselves. We are now seeing sanctions that are linked to the level of harm and the conduct of the organization when a breach occurs. So these are things that are nuanced that you need to look at that have come up in that report. And finally, we have expanded accountability when it comes to third-party processors. So you as a company, as a controller, when you have agents, when you have call centers, when you have debt collectors, especially in finance sector, your debt collectors, their actions are now linked to you. So if they go and they commit crimes out there, or they handle data in a way that is not allowed, those activities are going to be linked back to you and you're going to be culpable. So as professionals in these organizations, this is the moment to, first of all, reassess. We need to reassess our data practices. We need to strengthen our internal controls, and we need to align our business operations with the regulatory expectations. Looking into 2026, I can't help but think of a conversation that I had. It was a conversation between Mr. Houghton Irungu, if I'm not wrong, yes, and Moses Nyabanda, who's the MD of Equity Bank. This was a conversation that was happening in the annual privacy conference that was being held in Mombasa a few weeks back. And he was speaking on hacks that he has seen in the banking sector on how to implement privacy by design, because I think privacy by design is the actual key to making sure organizations are compliant when it comes to data protection. Because privacy by design allows you to think of the what and the how when you're at the creation stage. When you're creating a product, when you're creating a service, when you're using a system, you think about how are we going to be collecting our customers' data, our data subjects' data? What are we going to be using it for? And if you incorporate that from the beginning, it's going to save you a lot of headache. But anyway, he was basically saying that for him, his hacks were privacy by design has to become a governance function. It has to be a conversation that is being had at board level so that the board is able to track how are we safeguarding our information? Is our security tight? Because if it is tight from that point, then it cascades down to every level of the organization. That way, you can ensure you're really compliant, even operationally. He also said that it is inevitable. You just have to invest in state-of-the-art systems, state-of-the-art technology, so that you can take advantage of all of these things that are coming up. AI is now here to stay. Just saying because you have a license for Copilot that you can shift now and focus on that. Have you checked how Copilot deals with the data that is in its reserves? Have you really gone into the basics to see the safeguards that are in place? So he said that for organizations moving forward, it's very important for you to buy systems. Don't be stingy. Just invest in your systems. Make sure they're state of the art. If you're still using systems for 2014 and you expect you're not going to be hacked, no amount of updates will save you. You will update that system. It will leave you hanging. Food for thought. And finally, he said that you need to be technologically savvy with how you're dealing with your third parties. Third parties are a key risk, as we have seen, for any organization, because you can't operate in a silo. You can't not have third parties. It makes your functions better, but also opens you up to a whole other level of risk that moving forward into 2026, we might want to look at, because we're not the only ones using AI and emerging technology. Your third parties are also using them. Do you know if they've safeguarded their systems? Food for thought. I'll let you marinate on that. Let me know what you think about all those gems in the comment section, and I'll see you on the next one.